Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Kennedy, and I'm with the Small Association Leadership Alliance, or SALA. I'm happy to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Sarah Gaydos is the art director for GRAPHEK, and Denise Gavilan is the owner of Gavilan and Associates. And they've partnered together over the years to bring associations, marketing, communications, and visual solutions that make an impact. Today they will walk you through 10 tips for rolling out your rebrand and share case studies from 2 associations. Sarah and Denise, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We're so excited to have you guys all on the call today. Rebranding and launching the rebrands are one of our favorite projects to work on. So really excited to share some easy tips that you can implement and take home to your own groups and organizations to hopefully help fine tune and get a strategy for if you are doing a launch of something. So starting out with tip 1, kind of from the beginning, is building a rollout team, making sure that you have the tools and the people to have a successful launch. So when you're thinking about this, think about any internal people, external people. If you're going to bring anybody else in, who will those people be? What will their key roles be? Who's going to be that spokesperson and kind of help monitoring how you're going to be pulling all the materials together, who you're going to be leading the launch with, and then thinking about if you're going to have a committee or board members, how are these people going to have a role? And we like to think it's really important to have all of these people at the table from the beginning of this, so you're all on the same page. There's not going to be any big surprises going down the line, and that you're all just kind of have that goal of what success looks like from the very beginning, so you don't have to do any kind of backtracking. Tip number 2, engage those brand ambassadors. There's so many people that really do love your brand, love your audience, and they want to be a part of it. So who will help energize those people that you're trying to reach? Are there anybody that can help via social media, spread that news, share it on their own platforms? Lots of times you get great engagement through that. So monitoring how you can use those assets. And thinking about if there's going to be any opposition, kind of forward thinking, if there's going to be any issues, how will you address that? How will these key stakeholders help with that as well? So kind of getting ahead of some of those issues that might arise and using those people within your network to help kind of spearhead them so that they don't become really big mountains out of molehills.
So tip number 3, this is Denise, is telling your story. And before I even move into this, I will let you know you're going to see a couple of case studies today that Gavilan and Associates and GRAPHEK have worked on over the years. The first study is with the American Association for Anatomy, and the other case study is for the American Association of Dental and Oral and Craniofacial Researchers. And that's a big mouthful, but we'll show you why that makes sense in a few minutes. So tell your story. Everybody has a reason to rebrand, right? And what is the reason that you're rebranding? Is it because your logo looks like a seal from 1970s, like the one that's on a government office building? Is it because you've changed your name? Is it because your organization has maybe changed their focus? Is it often because we found that a lot of associations, what they use the terminology, they want to broaden their tent. They want to bring in more members. They're offering new services, and their current brand and or their current name does not fit in their long-term strategic plan. So people are going to want to know your story. So we encourage you to talk to leadership, get a seat at that leadership table and say, why are we rebranding? Is it part of a long-term strategic plan? What does it mean? And what does the branding do to connect to our whole organization's journey? It's a long process to rebrand, right? So we don't want you to do this without knowing hardcore details about why you are rebranding and what it means long-term to your association. So let's show you an example. I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. This is the organization on the left. This is the same organization, but when we give you an example of telling your story, the American Association for Dental Research existed for a very, very long time, right? And as you can see on the left, that was their name. In July, they changed their name and they refreshed their branding to make it the American Association for Dental, Oral, and Craniofacial Research. As you'll see, the word craniofacial is what changed with the name, and the word oral changed with the name. This is a message that they are trying to expand the audience and the number of people who are within their organization. They did some research. They realized that AADR was not inclusive enough, and it wasn't bringing in all of the scientists who do study dental research. So they made a very concerted effort to expand their name by including these two keywords, oral and craniofacial. And so when you see this, this looks like it was an easy process. This was about a 2.5-year project. We have been working with them that long to make sure that the message was rolled out properly and that the new logo clearly represents who the new organization is. So you'll see that we also built some messaging, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. We can go to the next slide. So after you've told you know what your rebrand story is, as I just mentioned a couple of seconds ago, you need a messaging strategy. I mean, you really need a messaging strategy for any marketing and communications initiatives, but when you're going to rebrand, you really need a good strategy to get people excited. So let's go to the next slide. So when we talk about creating a messaging strategy, we recommend highly that you prepare 3 to 5 messages that are going to be applied to all of your rebranded materials. And look at that messaging and plan, how does it need to change? Does it need to change because of different target markets? Does it need to change because there's a different medium that you're applying it to? And is the messaging going to apply to the initial brand rollout and then evolve into something bigger? So on the next slide, I'll give you a hard example of this. This is the rebrand that we did for the American Association for Anatomy. The American Association for Anatomy used to be the American Association for Anatomists. So a couple of years ago, they worked with our teams to rename and rebrand their organization so that they were not just about the anatomist, but they were about the discipline of anatomy as a whole. So what does that mean? When we're talking about building the messaging strategy, once the new logo was done, we worked on a new brand that illustrated that now anatomy is being connected across the board. This association is not just about the person, the anatomist. Now the association is anatomy as a whole. So we came up with a very simple theme for the brand rollout called Connecting Science. And you can see on different pages here how the brand applies to different pieces. So in the first one, you'll see that we have a focus on the word science, right? We're connecting science. On the second one, in the middle one, it kind of looks more like a membership piece, right? Because you have a picture of this lovely woman laughing and engaged with the association. So we demonstrated by put focus on the word connecting with the arrow up there. Now, in the last piece, this is their membership brochure. This is a brand new membership brochure. And we were able to evolve the messaging so that connecting goes across multiple purposes. We're connecting science, we're connecting knowledge, we're connecting research, experiences, careers, and finally connecting you. This is an important message for a brand rollout. That's why we showed you this example, because we want people to understand, in particular with this association, we went from connecting just one person, the anatomist, to connecting you, the entire discipline of anatomy. So this is an example of the messaging strategy that we've used, and actually they are still using it. We initially thought it was only going to be used for the brand rollout, but it's working for the organization, and so they're keeping it. But that's what we're talking about in terms of getting your messaging strategy together.
And something that's so useful about this campaign was that really so many options for you and how you can use it from a design perspective as well as a messaging perspective. Each piece doesn't look the exact same, so you're getting something kind of fresh, kind of new, but it works really well as a whole system. So you're still getting some new perspectives to your audiences in different ways.
Absolutely. All right. Sarah, I think you're next.
Yeah, so
on the tools.
Now yeah, now that you have your team, you know, kind of the campaign, the messaging that you want, you have to think about how you want to actually roll it out via your marketing tools. So we put together a list of some great assets and ways that you can utilize your resources through video teasers. We have 2 examples. We have a teaser as well as the full launch video. Videos are super helpful, especially in this day and age. You know, all of the social media kind of, their systems like to favor video and motion. So that's a really great kind of tidbit and resource, is the videos will get higher traction within the feeds. Also social media posts, you know, making sure things are very visual, eye-catching, new website graphics so that it's extended throughout all of your platforms, signage, email banners. Swag is always one of my favorites. Who doesn't love free stuff? So getting that to maybe your key stakeholders, of course, your internal team, to get them really excited as well. And then thinking about ways that we can use marketing and writing as well as design. So press releases, blog posts, any kind of toolkit so that you can pass it on to maybe your brand ambassadors to take on their own and launch on their own social platforms or their own networks. And then infographics. If you have some great data, think about how you can kind of share that visually to tell your story. So on the right here are some examples from the AADOCR that Denise mentioned. They've got an advertisement there on the left, as well as some social media posts. Again, using a very conscious message and theme so that it's all kind of connected within their new branding. So here is AADOCR's video teaser. So this was launched before the brand actually was launched and revealed. So it was used to kind of get that excitement out there to the audience. So we'll play that here for you.
Training our bodies.
Whoops. That's not ours.
No, you'll always get some advertisements in there. But what this video teaser really did was get that kind of excitement and hype up so that people knew what was coming, and it wasn't kind of all of a sudden, why is there a new logo? What is all this new stuff? So it's getting people to know it's coming and looking forward to it. And again, using those resources that you have to kind of share that and get people excited. And then the next one. So next, this is the full launch video, and this is what they played on the day of their launch. Once the logo was revealed, all of their assets was revealed. So this was the big grand announcement. you can see in that example, the messaging and the whole kind of tone of it was very complimentary of their launch theme, the campaign that Denise was talking about. It really told that story of why the change, why it's going to be great and beneficial to you as a member, and how they're really expanding the audience to be more inclusive, and put science first, and finding all of these great assets and new materials that will be coming from this rebrand.
Well, and really quick, Sarah, before you go to the next slide, we had a 12-page document of messaging for this client. And it was everything from, and the message was distilled the best in this video, I have to say. That's where we had to simplify it the most because we only had a little over a minute to tell the story. But we literally had 12 pages of messaging, and it was really how we're going to apply that messaging to our social media posts, how we're going to introduce the new name to members, how we're going to recruit with the new messaging. What do we need to give the board of directors in terms of messaging? What are those FAQs that need to be ready and turned on if somebody has a question or challenges the rebrand? So to me, one of the most really critical tools or tips to take away from here is spend a lot of time on that messaging. Give yourself time to build out a messaging platform that everybody agrees with, and then you can apply it to those communication tools. But you don't want to get caught not answering a question about why you rebranded. So it takes a lot of time to think that through, but it's critical. And we can show you in this video that was time well spent, because this is the culmination of all those months of working on messaging. So, all right. Oops, there it is again.
It's so good, they wanted to play it twice.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving into tip 6, now that you have your messaging strategy, you know how you want to launch it. You just have to now think about what this could be. A very daunting task is thinking about everything that needs to be updated. But this is very important so that you have a very consistent, cohesive launch when you are ready. So we pulled together a list for you, hoping that this helps when you're assessing your materials, but it goes down to the very small things: email addresses and signatures. If it's a name change, that would affect your email addresses, business cards, all of your internal documents. So if you have handbooks, financial documents, invoices, letterheads, all of that would be included there, as well as external documents. If you ever go to conferences and exhibit, any kind of sales materials, if you do PowerPoint presentations, all of that fun stuff. And then thinking about trademarking so that you're protecting your assets that you've spent so much time creating, signage, ads, if you're listed anywhere else besides just your resources. So if you're in any kind of directories, thinking big picture here, and this is all the kind of administration aspect, but you can see some examples on the right for the American Association of Anatomy. We did some business cards, letterhead, and then for their email signature, they decided to have part of the kind of messaging and launch be within their email signature, so you can include some nice images there. And then thinking about your website. So obviously you want to make sure you update your logo. That's first and foremost. Any kind of data, tags, favicon, so people, when they're searching for you, they're searching for your new name, for your new brand, as well as any images or copy that might, have your old name in there listed. And thinking about this too with logos, thinking through all the different versions you might need. You see that full color logo and it looks great, but you will need a black logo and a full white logo for different applications, and thinking through making sure you have all of those assets ready when needed, including different file types. So that's the designer in me wants to make sure that you provide yourself with all the assets that you'll need. So things with transparent backgrounds, white backgrounds, everything there to make sure you have a successful launch. And then finally, going back to marketing, thinking about your media kit, your asset library, so that you have all of those materials that are going into the rebrand, any images, text, colors, fonts, all of that should be very easy for you to find and for your team to find so that you're all working from the same assets. Newsletter templates, promotional materials, ads. So this is where it can get a little more fun, a little more exciting to work on, but again, making sure that everything is cohesive across all platforms. And then finally, social media here, not just in your social media posts, but you have to think about your landing pages, having a nice call to action within your banners, updating your profile pictures, thinking about hashtags and how you can use that to get people excited and filter through posts, as well as your about us statements, because people will go through and read those, especially with these new, if you have a name change that's larger.
Okay, so now you have everything together, right? Building the timeline, it is probably one of the most critical. It actually could have been tip number 1, right after you have all of your people together. But let's take a next look at what belongs in your timeline. If you're finally your rebrand is done, when are you going to introduce it? A lot of organizations will introduce it in conjunction with an event, right? Your annual meeting, a virtual conference, a board meeting, something that is big and that has already has eyes on it. A lot of organizations will roll it out with an event. I had one client who rolled it out in conjunction with a new website. That's an event, right? Building a new website. So that's an option. Or maybe you have a whole new membership benefit or a new member category that you want to introduce, and rolling out the rebrand is the perfect opportunity to get in front of prospective members. But the bottom line is figuring out that timeline is critical. Once your rebrand materials are ready, I would say you have at least 6 weeks to get everything done, to get those social media posts written and ready, to get that website banner updated, to get ads in your journals, all the things that you need to do to communicate that Sarah just talked about. But I can't stress more the need for a timeline, because you will miss something if you do not have your timeline written out and you have the step-by-steps on who's doing what within the delivering all the materials. So that's my timeline pitch. Sarah is going to tip number 8.
And this is one of my favorite parts, is creating a new style guide and making sure that everything is just all in one nice package for you. Very clean and clear and easy to understand, but also including, your brand elements. So as I said earlier, your colors, your logo, how your logo can be used. So making sure you have kind of parameters in there, photography, all of your graphic elements should go in here so that if you're handing this off to different designers, they all know kind of how your brand should be looking so that it doesn't look like a bunch of different people are touching it. But in addition to all of that, it's great to always have your introduction, your purpose, your beliefs, all of the kind of messaging and brand personality information up front as well. So if you have different writers, it does have that cohesive voice and cohesive kind of representation to your audience. So having this all in one place will be super helpful for you all internally, as well as if you work externally, to make sure everything is kind of on track. And I always like to say there's normally one person in an organization that becomes the brand police. And this will really help you so that you won't have to do a ton of policing. You can just pass on these guidelines, tell them to follow this kind of approach, and hopefully it'll make all of your lives easier.
Okay, so tip number 9, this is launching your new brand internally first. Your employees, your board members, your core volunteers, those are your most important audiences that you need to get on board, and that they deserve to see that rebrand and the materials first. Now, some of them might have seen it along the way, but when you're doing a really big relaunch, let's give it to them first. Let's have a rollout event if possible, even if it's everybody, toasting on Zoom, right? If you can't get in touch personally, but you have some kind of event. And then you invite your management. We talked earlier about that rebrand story, asking management to be part of this rollout and explain why the rebrand is important. Have your team show off the new look. A couple of years ago, and we had rebranded not an association, it was a nonprofit that worked with kids. And what we did in tandem with the rebrand is we had the organization send t-shirts to all these kids and ask the kids' parents to take a picture of them wearing the new t-shirt and putting it on social media. That was such a huge hit for introducing the new look. You could do the same thing with your staff. Give them all t-shirts, ask them to show it off. You could give them hats. You could give them some kind of fun swag, anything that allows them to take a nice picture and that hopefully they would be interested in sharing. That just gets more of the brand out there. Demonstrate your new style guide. Sarah, I've seen Sarah's team do this many times. When the new brand comes out, they have a tutorial between the design team and the internal communications team so that they understand the elements of the new brand. That is critical. And it might be with 5 people or it might be with 1 person, but it's really an important step. Provide messaging and graphics that your staff can share with their own contacts, right? So maybe one of your staff members is in charge of exhibitor relations. Well, that person should get a whole set of messages and graphics to send to the exhibitors that she works with or he works with all the time. Same thing if that person works with all of your sponsors as a point of contact. You want to arm your staff with the tools so that they can help extend the messaging. And then, of course, the easiest thing, but sometimes we always forget these little things, it's easy but little, is your email signature. Everybody turn that new email signature on November 1st. The new brand is live. Here's the logo. Turn on that signature. So we encourage you really to look closely at your internal audience, and every component needs to be touched and they need to launch it first so that they have ownership of it. Then when you're done with that, tip number 10 is the public. Launch everything to the public simultaneously. It sounds so easy, doesn't it? Oh, right, we're just going to flip a switch. Well, that's what we hope you will do. So we can go to the next slide. So look at your list and make sure everything that's public facing is aligned for the brand launch. Your website, your social media, your email template, your staff signatures. Those are critical so that people are not confused. We do not want to cause some confusion. So if the American Association of Dental Research has a landing page that says dental research, but then, oh, here's this new video that says we're the American Association of Dental, Oral, and Craniofacial Research, it's going to confuse people. So we encourage you as much as possible to look at every single high-profile, public-facing communications tool to get the message out. So you can hold off on your office signage. People aren't going to see that, right? But don't hold off on making sure your website and anything public-facing has the new brand and makes everybody feel confident about why you made this new brand decision. So those are our top 10 tips. I think Sarah's going to recap them and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, so hopefully now with these 10 tips, you feel like you'll be ready to roll, at least have some tools in your tool belt to help kind of think about the big task of launching it, but also getting excitement within your team and making sure that it is launched successfully. And you know, we always love doing it, so we hope that this helps you guys get excited as well.
Great. Okay, we can move on to Q&A now, guys, if you want. I've got a couple of questions here. Just as a reminder, again, anyone who wants to submit a question, please do so with the chat or the Q&A functions. Let's go ahead and get started with Q&A. So what are the biggest mistakes organizations make when rebranding?
Now that's a loaded question. I think if they don't follow these 10 tips, they're making mistakes. No, honestly, I think, to me, and Sarah, you can jump in, one of the biggest mistakes they get is not having buy-in, really, like not having buy-in all the way from the board down. You have to have buy-in for a rebrand. This is going to cost money It's going to cost staff time. It's going to cause a lot of internal discussions and introspection of how you should present your organization. So getting buy-in, if you don't get buy-in across the board, that is a mistake. The other thing that I've noticed some mistakes associations will make is that the rebrand is not steeped in any research, right? You have just decided you just want to have a new logo or you want to have a new visual brand for your website, but you haven't done any research to figure out what are the core elements that you need to message with your new visuals. So that's another mistake I've seen organizations make. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one mistake I've seen is not taking the time to really devote to it or trying to rush it. I think, you know, the more time that you give yourself to put into this, the better it's going to be and the better it's going to be received if you put very thoughtful intention behind it. So building out a realistic timeline without trying to make everybody crunch and stress out. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit crunch time at the very end before you hit, you know, post. But I think, you know, making sure you build out that time so that your story is very well thought out. And that your designers, your internal team all really have that time that they need to create a very thoughtful custom design and brand.
Great. I'm going to go out of order because I got a question here that actually kind of dovetails with that. And it's along the idea of consensus building. How do you convince the organization's decision makers that a rebrand is timely or needed?
Yeah, that's a good one. So let me just say something. You know, when the two case studies that we showed, the goal was to increase membership and to demonstrate that their organization was bigger than what they were founded to be, right? So you can't do that. You cannot decide that you want to grow membership and stay the same. So if I were the marketing specialist at an association and my CEO came to me and said, okay, we want to grow membership, we're going to offer these new categories, and that category wasn't even referenced in my association's name, mission, benefits, I would have to say we need to step back, because you can't just suddenly wave a magic wand and hope people come in as members. So there has to be that kind of buy-in long-term, and you have to understand also, what does it mean for your long-term strategic plan? What else are you supposed to do? If you can't, if what you're currently doing with your organization doesn't match what's in your strategic plan, then there has to be a lot of hard decisions and hard conversations.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also, you know, giving them very black and white, if you have data or member feedback, anything that you can give them that says like, this is the, you know, cost benefit of it. The
Yes.
Bottom line is always going to make them perk up and listen to what you're saying, especially if you get direct quotes, direct feedback from your members, whether it's statistics or just kind of, you know, their feedback. I think that'll always help sway your senior management.
So let me build on that a little bit. So I've been involved with a couple of rebrands, and often you'll hear, we think our brand is stale and things like that. What drivers have you guys seen, you know, maybe the top 2 or 3 things, like membership being an example, that really kind of motivate an organization towards a rebrand drill?
That's a good question.
Their competition. Competition is a big motivator. If you start by doing a competitive analysis to see who else is in the same space, and your competitors look amazing and fresh and young and exciting, and your organization looks like it's stuck in 1975, I think your competitors will push you a little bit to make that decision. As I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you want to expand who's under your tent. I keep hearing that phrase, under your tent, this year. Who is under my tent? Who are my members? Who are my sponsors? Who are my exhibitors? I want to expand that. And I can't expand that if I don't look like an organization that they want to belong to. So those are a couple of things that will push that. What do you think, Sarah? Anything else to add?
I think expanding on that under your tent aspect, beyond just, your exhibitors and it's and the kind of professional diversity, you also want to think about inclusivity. There's a very large younger audience that's coming into the workforce. Older audiences are starting to retire, so wanting to make sure that you are appealing to that new age group, as well as all of the different kind of races, and DE&I is also important right now. And it needs to be important, and it needs to be continued to be a big, kind of decision factor. So I think that's another thing, is making sure that you're continually checking yourselves and checking your organization to make sure you're following those leads and setting a good example as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned sponsors, because I would imagine the brand that you're projecting could very much have an impact on the types of constituent groups that you're trying to do business with beyond membership. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go to the other end. I have a question here. How do you measure success? What are your metrics after you've gone through the rebrand and you've launched it, and hopefully everything's been neatly packaged together and everybody's timely and on the same page? I guess I would expand this question a little bit by saying, what time frame do you look at measuring success, and what are those metrics?
That's a really good question. So one thing to remember with a rebrand is it's not waving a magic wand and suddenly 5,000 people are going to join your association. If that's the purpose of your rebrand, is to bring in new members and to really expand your offerings, it's going to take a lot of work. So it's over many years that it happens. It doesn't happen over a few months, but metrics for success from the short term would be looking at, are your members excited about the brand? Are they sharing it on social media with their colleagues? Is your staff reinvigorated? Is there a lot of new traffic to your website? Is your social media gaining engagement? Are the things that are so public facing people getting excited about? Are people writing articles or blogs and saying, oh, this is such a great opportunity. Thank goodness that they expanded. Now there's new opportunities for growth. So it's hard to say what those exact metrics are, except looking at your marketing tools and see which ones are growing and which ones are being paid attention to. But from a long-term perspective, it's going to take a lot of time, especially if you have something like growing membership, growing exhibitors, growing sponsors. All of that takes time and more money and a lot more resources.
Yeah. And I think in short term, if you're wanting to see success of a launch or a particular message, it's always great to follow the analytics behind social media, behind your website,
Right.
Seeing how much engagement different posts and different types of messages are getting, so that you can gear your messaging and kind of content towards ones that are getting a little bit more traction.
Great. Okay. Well, I've reached the end here of the questions. So I would just ask, do you have any final thoughts? And of course, feel free to let folks know how to get a hold of you if they're interested. And then we can turn it back to Kevin to close it out.
So go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, I think, this is such an exciting time within an organization, and to just enjoy it and be a part of it. I think take ownership and pride in what you're doing is always going to help produce great content and get people excited about it. So I'd say don't be afraid to really kind of dive deep and kind of incorporate all the different members of your team, so that they can all have that pride and ownership and want to really share this launch with everybody.
And my closing thoughts are not to be afraid of a rebrand. And it doesn't have to take 5 years. It doesn't have to take $500,000. It can be done. It's just, you have to really prioritize what makes the most sense. But don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to go to your supervisors or whoever and just say, this is what needs to be done in order to make our organization a little bit more relevant and a little bit more exciting. Come to people like us for just clear-cut advice on how to do it. It doesn't mean that we're all partnering, but at least we have a lot of experience and can show you these case studies and tell you how the process works. You know, this presentation assumed that your rebrand was done, right? We're rolling it out, but all the work prior to it, we haven't even talked about. That's a whole other webinar, but don't be afraid of it. So.
All right. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We will follow up with all of you and make sure you all have access to the recording of this webinar and you can share it within your own teams. But thanks again to Sarah and Denise. I hope you all have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to everyone soon. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.